If someone told you that they were hearing the voice of God, how would you respond? My suspicion is that you would think that this was a person in need of some help. That in general, we don't expect people to hear the voice of God in the world we live in, and that it's not usually a great sign. And yet, the beginning of this week's Parashat Vayikra, we start with the voice of God. We hear Vayikra el Moshe, Vayadaber Adonai elav me'ohel mo'ed lemor. That once the tabernacle's been finished in last week's parasha, in this week's parasha, God calls to Moses, and God says to him from out of the tent of meeting, saying, it's a curious verse because it says, Vayikra el Moshe, there was a call to Moses, Vayadaber Adonai, and then God spoke. Right? Why does it not say that God called to Moses and then spoke? Why do we get this? There was a call and God then spoke. First, I think the Torah is saying that the call comes first and the details come afterwards. First is the calling, the Vayikra, and then the Vayedaber, which is the details of what it actually is that God wants to say. And I think that that's how God speaks to us today, that it isn't exactly words that we hear. We don't hear the voice of God telling us what to do anymore, but we can still hear God's call. Perhaps in moments when our conscience calls us to act, when we see someone in need and we feel moved to respond, the call of God stirs us from our actions, from our lives. It demands action. It calls us to move, lech lecha, to go. And sometimes the call comes first and the details have to follow. This week, I know many of us have been very concerned about what's going on in Ukraine. And I was particularly struck by Russian bombs hitting Babin Yar, the site of where tens of thousands of Jews were massacred in the Holocaust. And President Zelensky of Ukraine called upon the Jews of the world to speak out, to not remain silent in this time. In this moment when over 1 million people have been displaced by invasion, adding to refugees already fleeing violence and persecution in Syria, Afghanistan, China, beyond, we remember that we too have been strangers in a land that's not our own, that we were strangers in Egypt, and so we are called to help those who are oppressed. We are called to do something. And once we hear the call to act, then the details can follow. Then we can reach from the Vayikra, the call, to the Vayedaber, the details of what we're going to do. There are so many organizations right now looking for financial support to help the people of Ukraine. Masorti Olami, the worldwide umbrella organization under which the Masorti movement in the UK and our own synagogue is a part of, is doing a special fundraiser in support of the many Masorti communities of Ukraine, which have been turned into bomb shelters, into camps for those who are displaced. Or you can give money to charities taking care of refugees here at home or in Europe. You could write your MP to ask them to support refugees. There are so many actions we can take, but we have to do something. And in the end, when we try to figure out whether it was really the voice of God we were hearing or not, I'm not sure we can ever know for sure. But perhaps a measure that we can measure ourselves by is, how did we act when we heard the call? How did we respond? If you made the world a tiny bit better, if you helped some human beings in need, brought a sliver of light into the darkness, then maybe looking back, you can say that that was the voice of God after all. I wish you Shavua Tov. May it be a good week, a week of increased peace and safety in the world.